And good afternoon to the Power of Pride, developing self-determination and leadership through a disability pride lens. For those that need the code, it's 88. Hi, I'm Frank Vaca. My pronouns are he, his, them. I'm the coordinator for Leaders for Inclusion, part of the program staff that helps 18 to 26-year-olds with development disabilities develop their leadership and advocacy skills. I was a prior peer mentor and had other choice jobs and found a perfect spot at Michigan Development Disability Council.
Hi, my name is Laura Hall. I'm the program director for the Leaders for Inclusion program. My pronouns are she, her, hers, and Frank and I are both from Michigan Disability Rights Coalition, which we'll talk about in a moment. We also wanted to note our colleague that couldn't be here today, Asia Thomas. She's also the co-director of the Leaders for Inclusion program. Does anybody need image descriptions in the room? No? Okay. And it's very nice to be here. Thanks for coming to our session. So, that's you, Frank.
Throughout our presentation, we welcome questions. Please feel free to raise your hand and ask questions during our presentation. We will also have time at the end for any questions.
We're very informal, so don't feel like you can't ask questions. Oops, wrong way. Sorry.
So the agenda today, what we will cover: overview of MDRC and LFI, what is disability pride, navigating ableism and internalized ableism, disability justice, building blocks of pride, and then inclusion.
So I want to talk a little bit about Michigan Disability Rights Coalition and our mission. So our mission is that we cultivate disability pride and strengthen the disability movement by recognizing that disability is a natural and beautiful part of human diversity while collaborating to dismantle all forms of oppression. So I just want to note that most of the employees at Michigan Disability Rights Coalition have disabilities, and so we really come at our work from that disability pride perspective, and seeing that as something that is not something to be ashamed of, or really trying to build that in other people. And then the part about collaborating to dismantle all forms of oppression, we realize that as people with disabilities, we're not just people with disabilities. We have all sorts of other identities, maybe part of the LGBT community, maybe a person of color. And because our community is so diverse, we have to be concerned with the other areas in which people are being oppressed, to make sure that people are able to be their whole selves and who they are. And so that is a very important part of what we do, is working in coalition with others to dismantle oppression. I want to talk a little bit about the Leaders for Inclusion program. It's kind of two-pronged. So this slide has to do with how our program serves participants. It's a free program for people age 18 to 26 with intellectual or developmental disabilities, and it's funded by the Michigan Developmental Disability Council. It's a 5-year grant. We're currently in our 2nd year. It's curriculum-based. It was written by people with disabilities for people with disabilities, meaning that Frank, myself, Asia, and our other colleague who used to be on the program wrote the curriculum, put our lived experience into it, really wanted it to be something that came from the perspective of people with disabilities, and taking what we know on our journey to disability pride and helping others reach that area, reach those goals. We provide opportunities for people to get into leadership roles or employment in their interest or passion areas, and that's really important, is to take what it is that the person is interested in or passionate about and try to build leadership opportunities based on that. We're rooted in disability justice, and inclusive of all identities. And so we, like I said, we are very intersectional in the way that we look at our work, and have people from various ethnicities, races, identities, and it makes for a very rich group. It's designed to meet the needs of all participants, including those with complex and high support needs. So that means that we've designed our curriculum so that there are ways for people to participate no matter what your abilities are. So if you're not able to speak, for example, and we need to communicate, we've developed pictures and things that you can point at, and a lot of the activities and things that we have, you can draw pictures, you can do artwork, you can use music, you can use your voice, you can use your AAC device. So the curriculum is really designed to meet everyone's needs. And then beyond the training that we provide the participants, we provide ongoing assistance and support, again, to connect folks to those leadership opportunities and employment opportunities, really going for those long-term kind of leadership opportunities. You have a question?
Since you're inclusive of all identities, I wondered why it was limited to 18 to 26.
That's because that's the confines of our grant is to work with transition age youth. So there are other programs of the DD Council funds that targets other populations, but for this particular grant, they wanted us to target the transition age population. So yeah, you're right. So that is kind of one specific group that we have to focus on, but within that group, there's a myriad of people that we're serving. So, okay, next slide.
So Leaders for Inclusion program has a community organization aspect. We provide free trainings on disability pride and inclusion for organizations interested in becoming more inclusive of people with disabilities. And through that free training, we provide ongoing technical assistance to support organizations in implementing authentic inclusion practices.
And just to give an example of this, we have one organization that we've been working with that serves people with disabilities and is really looking for ways to include them authentically, starting with getting people with disabilities on their board. And so we've been working with them on what would it look like to have a person with a disability on your board? How would you need to change your practices so that people know what's going on? How would you, sometimes I join groups and it's a complete alphabet soup of acronyms, and it's hard as a person with a disability to jump in and try to be part of that. And so it's really more about how do we build the infrastructure so that people feel like they're welcomed and belong in that work that they're doing. And so other organizations are looking at other areas where they want to become more inclusive as well. Okay, so some of our core values, we've kind of touched on this, but people with disabilities are the best facilitators for the content in the curriculum. Again, we've put a lot of our personal experience into the curriculum, and we feel like when you're a person with a disability, sharing content with other people with disabilities, that can greatly enrich the content. And so we have worked in other projects to develop ambassadors that learn the material through a train-the-trainer model, and then they go out in the community and train other people with disabilities. With our current LFI cohort that you're going to learn about in a minute, we are kind of working toward that goal of having people present with us and share what they learned. Again, everyone has the ability to contribute and express themselves. It could be through language, behavior, art, writing, role-playing, technology, using pictures, pointing. And one point that we make sure to bring up right at the beginning of the program is that all people have the ability to advocate and lead. A lot of times when we're working with people in this age group, they feel like advocacy has to be some sort of big issue. That, I need to talk to my legislator, I need to write letters. And actually, advocacy is basically saying what you want and knowing what you want for yourself. So we use the example of advocating if you want pineapple on your pizza is an example of advocacy. It can happen quietly and it can happen with others, which is interdependent. And LFI is designed for people to become lifelong leaders. I think one of the purposes, to answer your question, that we're focused on 18 to 26-year-olds is because there have been a lot of grant programs that provide people with training, and then they go through the training and that's the end. The whole point of this program is to connect people to these opportunities so that they can keep learning, keep growing, keep developing their leadership and ideally paid employment abilities. So I'll go to the next slide.
So the topics that we cover are Introduction to Advocacy and the LFI program. We go over disability history, leaders in the disability justice movement, identities, ableism, internalized ableism, shame and shame resilience, disability pride, self-advocacy. There's cause for advocacy like problem solving, persuasive arguments, leadership styles, working with different types of leaders, and we then give them like a certificate and closing and celebration, but that's not the end. They continue being part of a building coalition of ambassadors, which at any time can be called upon to help support the next generation.
Yeah, and we've designed this in a way where these topics aren't necessarily in the order in which we train them, but we've put these in a certain order because we feel like understanding things like disability history and leaders in the disability justice movement and ableism and internalized ableism really helps you to understand how you get to that place of disability pride. We feel like those other pieces really need to be understood and able to get to that point. And so these are very intentional in the way that they're put together to sort of take people through a journey, much like Frank and I have been through a journey before we had a curriculum or something like this that we just sort of learned from being a part of the community. So, this picture is our Leaders for Inclusion fall cohort. We had 5 participants and a couple of personal assistants that are here in the picture, along with my service dog, who everyone just needed a break to love on. So this is during the break when we were all just kind of needing some time to decompress, and this is a really great group to work with. Again, we have people from different geographic areas, different identities, different support needs, and so it was both very successful and challenging, which we're going to talk a little bit about in the future slides too. But this is the very first cohort that we went through.
So the successes of the Leadership for Inclusion Program 2022 fall cohort, there was 5 ambassadors from diverse backgrounds and identities that attended the retreat. We put out a widespread application process. They were very interested ambassadors to meet. 100% reported being satisfied after the retreat with program activities and being able to better say what they wanted. They actually built a supportive network between one another, like wrote notes saying this time we need to pay attention to the instructors, please put away your phones, and kept checks on one another and built that support system that we couldn't imagine. All 5 investors are, 3 of the 5 investors are employed. 1 is in college, 1 is in the community programming. Rich conversations and community building, as I mentioned. Ongoing support in their leadership areas like service animal access, disability,
representation.
Sorry for trouble with the word, in the media, foster care and disability, work life and conflict resolution, and being part of a team.
So I do want to mention, but I think I forgot to say in this slide, we held a 2.5-day retreat over a weekend at a hotel in Battle Creek, and weren't sure how that was going to go, but these were the successes of the program. And when we talk about the leadership areas, those are the areas that the individuals chose that they wanted to work on for their advocacy areas. So one person was very interested in service animal access. We did a activity about disability representation in the media, and that really sparked one of our participants to say, I can't believe that, people with disabilities don't play roles of disabled people. That really just kind of blew her mind. And so she has been wanting to work on making that known and kind of changing that. We have one participant that in the past had a lot of conflict at work and was learning his conflict resolution skills, and so that is something that we've been working with him on. And then the other participant is very, very diehard Michigan fan, and really wanted to be part of a team. And so we're looking at what does that mean to be part of a team, and how can we build a leadership opportunity out of that idea of wanting to be part of a team. So that was our fall cohort. So lessons learned. So here's some of the things that maybe did not go so well. We spent some intentional time for community agreements and community building. I wish that we had slowed down a little bit and spent a little bit more time on building those community agreements and building the community between the participants. As the time went on, as Frank said, we found that people were building community naturally when we found little notes like, hey, pay attention, and they were supporting each other, which is very cool. More breaks for processing, reflection. One of the biggest things I think is we've learned that we need to make use of the digital age. One of the hardest things was keeping these folks off the cell phones. And so we thought, they have so many of these things now that you can integrate with cell phones, and like Mentimeter and Kahoot. And one of the things that we thought of is for our next cohort, we're going to try to integrate some of these things so that they can be using their cell phones or looking at things on their cell phones while we're going through the content. We did have a check-in, kind of an exit interview with each of the participants at the end, and kind of got at their leadership areas, but I think we would have liked to have spent a longer time talking about that and what that looked like. And now we're going back and trying to fill in the holes. I'm sorry, you had a question.
Yes, the name of those programs again that you used?
Oh, Mentimeter is one, Mentimeter, and Kahoot, I think, is Kahoot. Kahoot. So, yes. Going back and planning for a second retreat, I think that we're going to have less retreat content and more content in the continuing education sessions that we're having afterward with the first cohort. We really just need, I think, more time for this community building, and if we have to cover less in the retreat content, that's okay with me. I think the community building is more important, and the making sure that people have time to process and reflect. And then looping in family, we are working with 18 to 26-year-olds, so they're adults, but oftentimes family is still very involved in their lives. And so we have found that family can be allies in helping us kind of continue to reinforce the topics that were learned during the retreat. And so, again, working with family, I think, helping them to understand what we went over and how they can support that at home is another goal area of ours. And I wanted to let you know that we are starting the recruitment process for our summer cohort, which is going to be held in August. We are just trying to nail down a location, but I have a feeling it's going to be in Lansing. If you have somebody in mind or you want more information, for right now you can contact us at leaders@mymdrc.org for more information, and that application will be coming out really soon, like within the next week or so. So we are excited to start recruiting for our fall cohort. That usually involves filling out an application, and then we do a phone interview with folks, and we have a question, and then we make some choices from there. We are looking. We had 5 in the first one, which is not as big as we wanted, but we're looking for up to 15 this time. Yep. So, if you know of anybody, please send them our way. Okay. So what is disability pride? Many of you may know this already, but I think it's important to kind of go over it and how we define it. It's understanding that as a person with a disability, you're part of a large, diverse community that has been the target of historical oppression, and bad things that have happened in history, and also resistance, where people have risen up and fought against that oppression. And part of having disability pride is understanding that our community has a really rich culture, history, and justice movement.
And now we're going to watch a short 5-minute and 30-minute, 5-minute, 30-second video on disability pride. It's not as great as it will be. We're planning on recreating this video, but please enjoy.
Disability pride to me is the ability for me to be able to live the life I desire, and for my goals and dreams for me to aspire to.
Disability pride has to do a lot with being part of a larger community of people with disabilities. It's not merely sort of a pride in yourself, but a pride in your community.
So disability pride is me being proud of who I am, which is a highly political thing in this day and age and just political surroundings. To say you're disabled and proud, people don't really understand what that means. People think it means, that you're okay with yourself, and yes, that's part of it, but it also means, like, not only am I okay about who I am, I'm also connected to a community. I'm also connected and all about creating a space where I can just be myself without barriers in society.
Disability pride in my daughter's life has meant, to me, has been watching her discover and develop a respect and an acceptance and a sense of being proud of, not proud of how she's different from people, but proud because she's different from people. It's easy for, like, in this world, for people to marginalize. What we have done as a society is marginalized and oppressed people with differences, because we would rather not see people with differences, and people with physical disabilities especially make people who don't have physical disabilities uncomfortable. So
having a good sense of who you are, of your disability, and feeling comfortable with that, and having a good sense of your community, and feeling kind of a oneness with other people in the disability community, and understanding the disability culture and history.
So disability pride for me is really, correcting society about disability, because society looks at disability as something negative and something that to overcome. Like I can overcome my race, it's impossible. So I, in Sins and Valley, Hip Hop, and a lot of other I think that's just disabled pride because he or she has a disability and he's doing his artwork, so that's pride right there. So that's, that's disability pride for me.
It's sort of a way of life, right? It's a way of carrying yourself and a way of rejecting stigma.
And it's just me being to identify as a person with a disability without feeling the shame and guilt that I may not fit mainstream society.
So for me, it's really played a big role in getting really comfortable with myself besides just being Latina, besides just being a woman. It's really helped me be comfortable with being disabled and then also incorporate that into my identity and be able to deliver that and share that and be proud of that with other people and then use that pride for power.
What's important about pride and why one ought to have it has a lot to do with empowerment, because I think that one of the most fundamental ways in which our society maintains a system of oppression or of political domination of people with disabilities has a lot to do with pity. Because pity has everything to do with having low expectations for people with disabilities, and it has everything to do with not seeing people with disabilities as being capable of running their own lives. That's sort of what is essential to the notion of pity to me. And so pride, or disability pride, is a response to that. It's a community's response to that, and the rejection of that notion of pity.
It's important for people with disabilities to be exposed to disability pride because it's important for every person to embrace all the parts of themselves and their identities. And I think if you aren't proud of who you are, it's going to be hard to present yourself to other people the way you want them to see you. And instead, they'll see you the way they want to, and you'll feel rejected and invisible.
It's important for people to be exposed to disability pride because we receive so many other messages that tell us that we're not worth as much, we're less than, we're not good enough, we need to be cured. And with all those other messages, that affects who you are inside once you internalize that. So it's important to have disability pride because it helps you combat all of those negative messages that you occur on a daily basis just by being part of this world.
Why I think it
Thank you. So any thoughts from the video? Anything strike you? Yeah.
I just feel enlightened.
Yeah?
Yes, because I've never gone this far about disabilities. You just go with what I thought was the norm. Okay, we're going to try to help them, and that's it. But the more people with disabilities speak out like this, it's enlightening me, and I can go and talk to my consumers or clients and tell them, hey, rock on.
Yeah. Right. That's great. Yeah.
I was just going to say that I've heard they said that instead of person with disabilities, you say differently able person for a physical disability. So I was wondering if the pride lens, if you usually say.
We're going to get to a slide on that. Yeah. In just a minute. Yeah, this is
We
so.
have a question in the back.
Oh, sorry, I didn't see you.
I was just going to say that I really appreciate the focus on letting people with lived experience define what disability pride is and define what things make them proud, because I think in a lot of the organizations that those of us who are serving people work for, we're trying to define that and tell them, like, this is why you should be proud of who you are. And
Right.
so I love the emphasis on letting people with lived experience write the program and make the definitions and
Yeah. So, in this video, we heard a lot about how good it is to live your life from a place of disability pride. So next, we're going to get into what gets in the way of that. Why doesn't everybody experience disability pride? And the answer to that is ableism. And we're going to talk a little bit about what ableism is, but I really like this quote by a friend of ours called Mia Mingus. She says, ableism is connected to all of our struggles because it undergirds notions of whose bodies are considered valuable, desirable, and disposable. And so when you think about ableism in the very heart of it, I think that idea of valuable, desirable, and disposable really defines kind of what ableism is and how people are treated because of how our society thinks about disability. And if you need an example of ableism, we need to only look back to like the COVID-19 crisis, when people with disabilities were considered high risk, but were also not prioritized in terms of getting the vaccine in a lot of cases, unless they were in a congregate setting. I was in that situation where I was told, if you get COVID, this could be really bad for you. You're not able to, fight the virus as well as some other people. But then I'm in, waiting months and months and months for a vaccine. And I think we saw a lot of different oppression kind of coming to light during COVID, but that's one that I know directly affected the disability community. Okay, so sometimes it's easier to talk about ableism by what it looks like rather than like having a definition, and that's what Frank's going to talk about.
So examples of ableism: pity, fear, and an invasive curiosity, overstepping and not maintaining appropriate social boundaries due to curiosity about someone's disability.
Has anyone ever seen this invasive curiosity, or is this just me as a person with a disability? Yeah? Anyone want to share an example? I have plenty, but yeah, go ahead.
I used to be a caregiver, and I was out with a consumer, and they were asking like what was wrong with him,
Yes.
and if he was my son, like what we were doing out.
And not talking to that person either, right? Right. Yeah. I've had people ask, how do you go to the bathroom? When I was out with my husband, how are you guys intimate? Like, I'm not going to tell you, I mean, it's not, or, just the what's wrong with you. In where I think it comes from is that, and this is a guess, but I think people see people with disabilities like at a distance with a buffer, like it's like, because you have a disability and it's a curiosity and they want to know, it's kind of like that social politeness sort of goes out the window. It's like they don't feel as though that's too much, because I don't know why, but yeah.
I was gonna say, sometimes I think it's a matter of people, because you don't fit that ideal of what society has determined the ideal is. It's almost like they feel like you're so insignificant and you don't matter.
Right.
They almost have a license to just be rude and be inappropriate.
Exactly. Yeah. Yeah.
I remember somebody telling me one time that a small child will ask a question before an adult will.
Mm.
And so many times, children will stare, at my daughter,
Mm-hmm.
and the parents are like, "Oh, don't stare."
Yeah.
But you know what? That child wants to know.
Yeah.
And I'm not going to do the scientific term, but as soon as I say, her legs don't work as well as yours do.
Right.
And the child's like, oh, okay.
Yeah.
You still talk to her? And I'm like,
Absolutely. Yeah.
but people automatically assume that it's because somebody's in a wheelchair, they can't talk.
Right.
They can't do anything, anything like that.
Yeah.
It drives me nuts when people say, can she talk? She can hear.
You can obviously communicate because I see that big smile on your face. Yeah, and the kind of like the don't do that, don't ripping kids away is like that just teaches them to fear people with disabilities. So that doesn't do any good either. So yeah, yeah.
I also think
Mm-hmm. Yeah, definitely, definitely. Okay. So a few more examples of ableism is ableist language, offensive terms, terms that others have created. Assuming that everyone wants to be healed or cured. This is something that people really don't get when they say, like, you know, what if there's just a pill and tomorrow you wouldn't have cerebral palsy? And I mean, no, I wouldn't take that pill. Like, my whole life has been, you know, I've been disabled my whole life, and it's hard to explain, but the trajectory of my life, I work in the disability movement, like, you know, it's just so many things are related to that. Yeah, I would love to feel what it would feel like not to sit in a chair for maybe, I don't know, maybe a day, maybe a week, I don't know. I'd go and I'd do some fun stuff and jump on a trampoline, and but I don't think that I would want to take this, like, really important piece of my identity and just erase it away. And I don't think that a lot of people get that, because all they see is suffering and hardship, and they don't see the good parts of having your disability as well. And then another example of ableism is assuming that people with disabilities always need your help. And I mean, like I say, I think it's always great to ask, but that making that assumption that, you know, I'm here and I can help this person, kind of ableist.
So examples of ableism continued: expressing admiration, amazement, and being inspired by people with disabilities. Then there's the hierarchy of disability and the myth of interdependence, which says that we are to be independent and not be interdependent upon one another, which we are. The only disability in life is a bad attitude, and you see this all around at times, and that's just admiration, and needs to stop.
So, expressing admiration. So, do people understand the problem with this picture? The only disability in life is a bad attitude. Has anyone heard of a woman named Stella Young before? Yeah, we love Stella. Stella, you know, Stella brings up this picture in particular. And she's a woman. She was a woman with a disability. Unfortunately, she passed. Who said that, you know, no amount of smiling at a pair of steps is going to turn that into a ramp. Or, you know, no, like, it's not focusing on, it's focusing again on the person and making it seem as though the disability is the problem, when in reality, like, all of our societal barriers, attitudes, discrimination are the real barriers for people with disabilities. So when I see stuff like this, I just kind of, you know, and it's problematic because people think this is really great, you know. The hierarchy of disability, I wanted to go into that a little bit more. I think within the disability community and within, like, service organizations and providers, sometimes we get in this mode of thinking that certain disabilities are better than others and some are worse. And I remember as a kid, my mom would say things to me like, or say things to other people like, you know, yeah, my daughter has a physical disability, but she's so smart, you know, or, you know, Laura, I know it's tough, and, you know, I know, you know, you can't walk, but you've still got your mind. And I always thought, like, okay, when she was saying those kind of things, but then when I got older, I was thinking, what does that say about my brothers and sisters with intellectual disabilities and developmental disabilities? I think if we were to look at a hierarchy, people with physical disabilities would be higher up on the hierarchy. People with intellectual and developmental disabilities may be lower, and then people with mental health disabilities, I think, would be somewhere near the bottom. That's just my sense in the way that we think about disability. And then this myth of, it should say myth of independence. We have this idea, and we always say that the goal for everything should be independence for the person with the disability. And that's what I believed up until the point where I got a full-time job and I couldn't spend 3 hours dressing myself in the morning anymore, and I had to get a personal assistant. And then it was like this whole feeling of I've lost my independence, and then feeling bad about myself because I can no longer be independent. Well, really interdependence, we all rely on each other for different things. And if I need someone to get me up in the morning and get dressed, that doesn't mean that I'm still not being independent. I'm just doing it with the support of someone else. And so I think we really have to think about, because independence is just, it's written into the plans. It's just the language that floats around in the disability service community, and kind of thinking about what does it mean to be independent and how can you be independent with the support of other people. Okay. The reason why internal ableism is really important to understand and can be dangerous is because it leads to internalized ableism for the person with a disability. And to that internalized ableism, to me, is when you take all of those negative messages that you hear or that you're experiencing as being a part of society, and you start to internalize them and feel certain ways about yourself. A big one for me is feeling like a burden. When I'm experiencing internalized ableism, I feel like a burden. But other ways that internalized ableism could look.
Overthinking or overanalyzing something as simple as, oh, should I have chosen this cereal or that cereal? And then you're just overthinking, overanalyzing, feeling that you should have chosen the Raisin Bran rather than the Frosted Flakes, and it's all, simple things in life.
So very aware of just the different ways that your brain works, and then feeling bad about that.
Yes.
Yeah. So it could be self-hatred about how one looks or acts, doubt about one's abilities, worth, goodness. This is a big one for me, feeling the need to be very pleasant, never demanding. So in a way that's like being afraid to be powerful. It can look like lack of asking for accommodations. For some people, and I think this is really, I don't want to generalize here, but I do think this is an issue for people who have non-apparent disabilities, is this pull to assimilate and prove people wrong, taking on more tasks to prove that you're not disabled or not hindered in any way by your disability. That sometimes gets me at work. I just feel like I have to overachieve, and I have kind of a perfectionist vibe. It could be isolating from one's group because you don't want to be seen as one of those people. Not using assistive technology, medication, or seeing a psychologist or a psychiatrist can be another example. Oh, okay. And then we have a internalized ableism large group discussion, and so this is one of the activities that we would take our 18 to 26-year-olds through. And we do a lot of role play. So here's one. You are in a wheelchair, you and your friends are planning to go to an event. Once you get to the event, you and your friends realize that the place where the event is held has steps and there's no other accessible entrance. You angrily think, I hate that I'm in a wheelchair, and tell your friends to go without you. There's no sense in you ruining their fun. How could you help reframe the situation for a person with a disability as an ally? Does that make sense? Okay. Yeah.
I think just offering to go somewhere else that's more accessible and remarking on how it's not their fault that the venue is not accessible and that that's a failing on the venue and has nothing to do with their disability.
Anything else? Yeah. Advocate for change is even better. Like that. Go and make a scene, right? Yeah. This is actually a situation that happened to me when I was in college. And I was just starting my disability pride journey, and I was part of the School of Social Work, and our whole School of Social Work had decided that they were going to plan a bar crawl, and their whole bar crawl was inaccessible places, and I just thought, man, this sucks, I really want to go. And I had a friend of mine that said, hey, wait, stop, back up a minute. She's like, are we really upset here that, like, you're in the wheelchair? Or are we upset that these jerks didn't think about us before they were planning this? And I really thought about that, and it's like, yeah, it's not really the wheelchair or the fact that I can't get in the building that I'm mad about. It's the fact that there's these barriers. But like I said, I feel like with disability, we see it as a personal problem and not a societal problem. So, yeah. So that we would go through a set of several different case scenarios, and have people do that in groups. And so thank you for indulging me in this. And I did have another activity, and I think we have time that we can take to do that. I wanted to introduce you. The whole focus of the LFI program starts with advocacy. Right off the bat, we tell them this is an advocacy program. So one of the first activities that we'll do, and we'll just do a mini version of this, is let's say that we're all shipwrecked on a deserted island, okay? And we can only take one thing that we have from the boat, or we're gonna sink. And so here's a list of a couple of things that we have, and I want one side of the room to advocate for one thing and one side of the room to advocate for another, okay? So let's say that we have in our boat a package of Oreos and one bottle of water. Okay, so this side of the room could be the package of the Oreos. This side of the room could be the bottle of water. Uh-oh, okay. You want the Oreos? So,
Cool.
no matter what you believe, and this is what we tell them too, okay, why should we keep Oreos on the island? They can be divided up, okay.
Cool.
Yeah.
All right, now this side, why do we want to keep water? One bottle of water.
Save the bottle, filter your water later, get rain.
Ooh, see?
Make something with a leaf to get clean water.
We're getting creative now.
Never died from lack of Oreos.
Although when I did this with high school youth, I had some really, really cool ideas coming out from the Oreos. Like, they were like, we could set a trap with the Oreos so that we could hunt. And I just thought, you guys are great. So if you ever need an advocacy activity, this is a great one that they have a lot of fun with. So thanks for indulging me about that. I wanted to make sure we got to that.
So a word about intention versus impact. I've learned that people will forget what you said, people will forget what you did, but people will never forget how you made them feel. Maya Angelou.
And that's just the idea that a lot of people, do ableist things, say ableist things, and say, well, my intention was this. Well, when it comes down to it, intention is great, but impact is what's more important.
Caseworkers, please listen to your attendees when they say they want this job and this job. Just don't have them fill out resume after application and of jobs that they're not even interested in following, just to check mark on it. That's a word about my intention and impact. It made me feel like I was just someone's paycheck.
Good point, Frank. Uh-oh, I hit a bad button. Oh, we're back. Okay. Okay. This might be familiar for some people, but we're going to go through it and then take it a step further. So, how many people have heard about the medical model and the social model of disability? Okay, so some people. So under the medical model, and this is what we've been talking about kind of so far, is that people with disabilities are seen, the disability is seen as the problem, a deficit, or something abnormal. People with disabilities are suffering and have a lower quality of life, and these are assumptions that we're making under the medical model. The remedy is for the person to be fixed and made as normal as possible, and I'm going to put that in quotes. I'm going to go to the next slide, and then I'm going to come back to the social model. Medical professionals and social service providers are the best people to provide treatment, interventions, and make decisions. Medical intervention is the best way to achieve independence, which is the ultimate goal. So again, we're going back to that idea that independence is the goal there. If we look at the social model, that's the idea that disability is part of who we are and an identity that we can take pride in, that societal barriers like lack of access, attitudes, stereotypes are the things that really limit the person and their quality of life. The remedy is for society to remove barriers, change attitudes, and provide inclusion. People with disabilities are the experts on their own lives and can make decisions about what is best. And greater independence could be achieved if societal barriers were removed. So the first one really focuses on the person, their deficits, their disability, their problem. The second one focuses on society, our views of disability, barriers, and those problems. Okay.
So MDRC values cross-disability, rejection of hierarchy of disability that we went over, and intersectionality, that we have one layer of many layers.
And I say this because MDRC is really moving beyond the social model into something that we call the disability justice model, which I'm going to go into next. Let's see, Frank, was this your slide? Let's see. So disability justice, this is a little wordy. This is again by our friend Amy Mingus, but it's a multi-issue political understanding of disability and ableism. It's moving away from rights-based equity model, equality model, and beyond just access to a framework that centers justice and wholeness for all disabled people and communities. So I think for the longest time we've been so focused on rights and equality, and really in order to get that for everyone, we need to look beyond just rights and look at, again, that whole person, all of their identities, all of the ways in which they're being targeted and oppressed, and how to support people who are in our community but may be different from us, and centering that for all disabled people. And so there's what's the quote, like, no one can be free until all of us are free, or I don't know if I've quoted that exactly, but it's kind of based on that idea. And we're going to go through some of the disability justice principles. You saw Leroy Moore in the video. He was the gentleman talking about music and artwork. His group, Sins Invalid, came up with these disability justice principles that we're going to go through.
So intersectionality, we do not live single-issue lives. Audre Lorde, the complex, cumulative way in which the effects of multiple forms of discrimination, such as racism, sexism, and classism, combine and overlap or intersect, especially in the experience of marginalized individuals or groups. Leaders of those most impacted, we are led by those who most know these systems.
Okay, going on. Another principle is that recognizing wholeness, that people have inherent worth and value outside of what society considers valuable and productive. And I think that's something where disability community really helps, because people within disability community are able to recognize that. And I think people outside of disability community, we're trying to bring them along to that. And so when we keep saying it's important to be in community, this is why. This is because people within the disability community get these kind of principles. And the sustainability, just knowing that in the long run we need to pace ourselves individually and collectively to be sustained long term, and that together our embodied experiences are going to guide us toward what we're looking for, which is ongoing justice and liberation. Collective access. So, looking at all identities, so as brown, black, and queer-bodied, disabled people, we need to bring flexibility and creativity that goes beyond typical access to being in community with each other. So one of the things that I really love about being in a disability community is like a lot of the things that I worry about everywhere I go, like first thing I walk in this building, I want to know where the accessible bathroom is. Like those kind of things are automatically, usually already thought of if you're in a disability community space. Or if there is support needed, there's less of a focus on where you're going to get that support because the community will provide that support. Is anybody familiar with the group called ADAPT? Okay. Jill raises her hand just slightly. Jill and I have been in some ADAPT things together. ADAPT is a national group, and we have chapters all over the U.S., and I help try to organize one that we have here in Michigan, but ADAPT is really focused on several issues. One is making sure that people have access to community home and community-based services over nursing home services because we put so much more money into nursing home services. So what ADAPT does is they kind of take it beyond the initial like advocacy type activities to nonviolent direct action and protesting. So like chaining yourselves to the White House fence is something that we've done. And Jill, I don't remember what we were in Debbie Stavenow's office for, weren't we? Right. So it's kind of that, and not that you don't take all those other steps beforehand, but it's kind of like when you get to the point where you have asked for a response and you've asked for a response and you don't get it, these are the people that will cause a complete ruckus and disrupt everything to make the point that this needs to be done. And it's really empowering because for once, when you're in a group of, if you go to a national action, you've got like 500 people in wheelchairs there. 500 people in power wheelchairs can make a big difference because you're not moving us out of that doorway. And, you know, usually it ends up with police and handcuffs and, you know, but like, you know, that's, that was really my first kind of, I got thrown into that when I was starting with community. And I bring that up just because like when I'm in with the ADAPT group, I'm not thinking, oh my gosh, I have to go to the bathroom. How am I going to get to the bathroom? Somebody has a PA there or a personal assistant that they'll loan. I mean, it's just a way of being in community with it, which I haven't felt before. So, and then the last one is that no mind or body can be left behind. Only by moving together can we accomplish the revolution that we require.
So, we're going to go over the building blocks of Disability Pride. The first one is practice. You get better with practicing.
And one way that we encourage people to start practicing Disability Pride is looking at language. So here we go. Here's your question. Okay, so we obviously have some offensive language, like words like retarded, handicapped, crippled, those people, spaz, psycho, crazy. We can all kind of agree that those are pretty offensive. And in working with younger people too, we have a conversation about the word crazy because this is used so frequently just in our normal day-to-day vernacular, right? And again, it's that intention versus impact. People just throw the word out there and think, oh, you know, that's not what I meant though. But when you're using words like that, you're describing words that have been used to oppress people. So the word crazy has been used to oppress people for ages. And so I really have been trying to work on myself and not use that word. So I come up with different words like wild or, well, that's really bananas or, you know. And then we have thriving language, which is a person-first language, so like person with a disability. Some people, and it kind of depends on where you are in the country, we have this like geographical differences, but on the West Coast, I think they tend to use disabled more, and here in Michigan, we've had person first language just kind of drilled into our head for the last decade. So we use person with a disability, so it could be, if you're using identity first, it could be deaf, blind, autistic, disabled person. Now here's where we get to your question about differently abled. There are these words in the community, and we call them surviving words, because they are in IEPs, words like special needs, and the problem with these words is that they were developed not within the disability community. So it's typically people outside of the disability community that have come up with words like differently abled, handicapable, or disability with a capital A. And the problem with these words, I understand the intent, right? The intent is to focus on ability, but it's almost like we're sending the message that disability is a dirty word. Like, it's not okay to say. And I think if we're talking about disability pride and, really wanting to come at people from a space of that, then we need to look at these words and really evaluate, where did they come from? They didn't come from us. And again, why is it that we feel like we have to
Kind of change the subject.
make it more palatable by using these different words? Does that make sense? Does that answer your question? Okay. Yeah. So, I mean, not necessarily bad, just icky.
It's a shifting of the whole definition and stuff like that. Like, oh, we can't talk about, so we're going to talk about this and talk about rainbows and unicorns and stuff like that.
I think needs are needs, and there's nothing special about needs, anybody's needs. So that's the one that needs to be. Yeah.
Are you able to talk just a little bit more about the importance of accepting identity first language, that's just as equally important as person first language?
Yeah, I think here in Michigan, it's some people have a choice, right? So some people don't want to be identified just as disabled. Like, they see having a disability as part of who they are, but not like their entire identity. So there's different ways of thoughts on that. And I think the most important thing is to ask people what they prefer. I personally don't care if you call me disabled or a person with a disability. I'm proud, to call myself a disabled woman. But I think it's probably best to talk to people about that and how they, I can't say there's a hard and fast rule for that.
The reason I pointed that out is in our county, part of the anti-stigma is you will use person first language, but those in the autism community are heavily
Yes.
with the identity first. So in a kind of like your intent, the intent is good. They want to bring respect.
Mm-hmm.
But asking the person seems the way.
Yeah. And that's true. Like, the deaf community, the autism community are very identity focused, and I think that's a good thing. And so I would want to respect and honor that. But yeah, asking. Yeah.
Okay, you had mentioned the home community-based service
Yes.
and how ADAPT is helping to change
Yes.
things. So I know the state of Michigan has put things in place for the home and community-based service.
Mm-hmm.
And they are put providers on high scrutiny because of the survey. So I want to know, did ADAPT help make the changes?
No.
Home and community-based?
No. Are you talking about like the electronic visit verifications and all of that?
No, locking doors, the client being able to lock their bedroom doors, the bathroom doors, just the name. So they are trying to, that's what I'm trying to say. They are
Yeah.
people who are thriving.
Yeah. I know ADAPT is aware of those issues. I think where ADAPT's focus more is on the funding and the money, and like how much money is put into community-based services and how much is put into nursing home services. And also trying to get people out of institutions and nursing homes that don't belong there. So there's a lot that goes into it. Yeah, but, yeah. Yeah. So when we talk about language, a lot of people say, "Oh, why does it matter?" Okay, I can't keep up. The language keeps changing, and it does matter because language is powerful, and we need to understand that it's been used to oppress and empower people throughout history. When people don't want to acknowledge changes that have been made in language, it's like you're not honoring the advocacy that people have done, the disability pride and the strides in the disability movement that we've made, by just saying like it's too hard to keep up. I hear that all the time. I still don't know why we use the word handicap for parking, and like that's about it. Like in any of the other sense, it would be considered offensive. And then again, back to your comment about the disabled person or person with a disability, the language somebody uses to refer to themselves is often a clue about how they identify. So it's important to pay attention to that. And, words have power. Okay, so we're gonna get into, we're into our second building block of disability pride, which is acknowledge.
So we're going to acknowledge the identity, acknowledges the losses, and acknowledge the gifts.
And I think what's important here is people acknowledge, yes, I do have a disability. For some people, you're still trying to get there, right? Even to admit, yes, I have a disability, because there's such a stigma around it, we don't want to acknowledge it. And acknowledge that there are losses to disability. We're not saying that disability pride is not grieving losses or, struggling with that. You don't want people to stay there where they're only focused on the losses and not the gifts of their disability as well. Understanding disability culture is an important part of disability pride. For example, we have disabled authors, disabled actors, we have t-shirts and funny things that, I'm just in it for the parking. You've seen some of those t-shirts. A whole culture around disability, just like any other identity would have culture. By the way, if you look at this picture down here, this is an ADAPT action. I'm somewhere in that crowd there. So that's kind of what that looks like when we're all huddled together. So we have a rich culture and a rich history, and that's part of understanding and appreciating your identity as well. Another part of the building blocks of pride is understanding disability history. We go through an entire activity in the LFI program where we go through a disability history timeline, and this goes back from BC times all the way to current times. We have events that have of oppression and events of resistance, and we go through the timeline, and we ask people to read events on the timeline, which is hard, especially working with younger folks, because we're talking about things like how people with disabilities were among the first to be gassed in Nazi Germany, how people with disabilities used to be chained to the wall and, shown off for a fee. And even, in more recent times, we're not gassing people in Nazi Germany anymore, but we're making decisions about who can receive a transplant based on what we think their quality of life is going to be. And if you look back at those parallels, yes, some things have changed, and we can, we can't outwardly gas people, but we are making decisions about who has the right to live and die. And that's a really hard thing. So we spend a lot of time talking about that, and how that affects people, how they feel about that, what surprised them, if there are things that they didn't know. A lot of this stuff is not taught in history books in school. And so this is often the first time that anybody hears about disability history. And then we go through acts of resistance. And what we find is that people tend to be very sad, angry, hurt, can't believe it when we go through the oppression activities. And then when we go through the resistance, it develops this kind of sense of pride in people that have stepped up in our community and done things to advance us forward. So, and then also being in part of a community. So we talk about how important it is to be part of a community, and I think there are times where people with disabilities need to be an intentional community with each other, but only if that's what they want. I think a lot of times we try to build community for people, and it's sort of an artificial sort of thing. And then need to be in community with other people as well and with allies. So these are just some pictures of some groups that we've had. And so building community is an important building block. And then finally, inclusion. And we're going to talk a little bit more about inclusion in a minute. I just wanted to share something. Let me check the time here. How are we doing? Okay. I want to share something that just came up in my inbox, or it came up at a meeting. And somebody used the word inclusion, and they said, you know, I think we need to move forward from the word inclusion toward the word belonging, because what we really want is belonging, right? And inclusion implies the idea that work needs to be done to include that person, and that people belong in the first place. And so I thought about going through and changing all of this, but then I thought, no, I'm just going to talk about this thing that I learned the day before last. So I don't merely want to be included, I want to belong, you know. So I think when we talk about inclusion from here on out, just place the word belonging. Inclusion is how you get there. You have to make effort to include people, but the goal is for people to belong.
And now we're going to go over the inclusion scale. It is different levels, different steps that you can be at. Think of the organization and where you might be, or what step you might be at. So just strive for level 5, which is the transformation of the system to be more inclusive or more belonging.
So yeah, several years ago we developed this inclusion scale to help organizations kind of gauge where they were in terms of truly including and belonging and creating a sense of belonging among people with disabilities. I had hoped that they would have the handouts for you here today, but they don't. So we're going to go through them, and then maybe if you feel comfortable, we can talk a little bit about where you think your organization or a place that you're involved in, if you're a person with a disability, how are they doing on the inclusion scale? And I'm not asking anybody to out yourselves or just, you know, this is just. So the first step is denial or exclusion. So people with disabilities are not included in the planning process, and they're just provided, you know, services. The charity model is that the organization pities people with disabilities and sees people's with disabilities' lives as tragedies. We've got a picture of Jerry Lewis on here. I don't know if a lot of folks remember the Jerry Lewis telethon. It's very much based on what a tragedy these people's lives are. We need to give money. And then when the disability community called Jerry Lewis out on it, he was not very happy. So.
Next is project with funding. People with disabilities are included until the group wants to do something that the person with disability can't do. The attitude is that they can sit this one out and can do another join in later. We had at MDRC a fund for a garden one time, and we found out that it was okay to build a wonderful, beautiful garden, but when those with disabilities wanted to be included, they were nowhere to be found.
And it's just, there's a lot of, in this area, it's kind of like, well, we do this, but people don't come, you know? And they don't come because it's not accessible to them, or they don't feel like they belong, or, you know. I hear a lot of that, like, well, we just don't have people that come to my store. Well, if your store has steps, I'm not gonna come to your store. So just kind of thinking about that. The next one is understanding and integration. So people with disabilities are plugged into organization, and systems are adapted slightly for the individual to fit in a way that the organization has always done business. And then finally, our number 5 is transformation of a system. You wanna go ahead, Frank? Sorry, I took
Authentic relationships, belief and commitment to include all at all levels. No, and the picture says, "No one is free when others are oppressed."
That might have been the quote that I was looking for. So, thinking that I thought you would have this in front of you, I was going to ask you to underline the statements that represent where you think that your organization is now, and circle where you think your organization, where you would like your organization to be. So, I'm going to try to go back. We've got denial, exclusion, charity, project with funding, understanding and integration, and then transformation of a system. Is anybody, how many people here are service providers? Okay, so we've got quite a few. How about people with disabilities? Okay, got some overlap there too, that's good. Any family members? Okay. So for those of you that work for organizations or you get services from an organization, where do you feel like you might fit on the scale? Yeah.
I would say ours is probably the one where it was basically find a service for the persons that can be part of the group. But I think it's because it's more like for legal reasons, because they, you know, they have to, they can't deny anyone the service. So I would say it's not with the true spirit of really feeling like we're actually doing this so that they can belong and feel a part of what, you know.
So do people with disabilities have any like voice in how services are provided, or?
I would say, I would guess no. It's more of, but that's just my guesstimation. I don't know.
Right.
But that's why I would say that's.
So not so it wouldn't be exclusion, it wouldn't be charity, probably wouldn't be project with funding, but maybe understanding and integration, like.
Yeah.
Okay. So you're adapting maybe slightly. So obviously we all want to get to 5, right? Okay. Anybody else have any thoughts? Yeah.
I think the organization where we work is like out of 3.5, we have some people on the board who have disabilities, and we have some people who work with us who are disabled, but we still have to work within the Medicaid model and the state funding model. So even though we have a lot of people who would really like to get us to a 5, then we write our treatment plans and the state says, no, you can't do that. And I think a lot of us are kind of in that. The constraint of wanting to move toward a disability justice model, but of course governmentally they're like 12 years behind that. So
Right.
we're like waiting for them to catch up.
Yeah. Yeah.
I'm thinking we're maybe in a here.
Okay.
Some disabilities. So I'm thinking of, what I did, I work exclusively within the autism community. And even though we don't do SISs anymore, but back when we did SIS, they were very protective of giving that information so that the individual who understands better visually, they would not provide that.
think that's, I mean, we're always working toward a number 5 too. I would say, you know, we're probably, I don't know, 4.5, but there's always different ways of how do you meet the needs of different groups of people with disabilities. It may be easier to meet physical access needs than it is like programmatic and systems kind of needs so that people can be truly included. Do you feel like you have any latitude in changing that, or does it feel like you're hitting a brick wall?
If you promise not to tell, I would like a copy of the system, gave it to the family, and made them not tell anybody.
Love it. Love it. So, thank you for that and for your honesty. And I know it's hard to look at. And Frank and I have our email addresses at the beginning, Frank. If you would like a copy of the inclusion scale, we can send you a copy.
Or even wanting training for your organization.
Yeah. So, yeah, that's one thing that we were going to say. So, as we said, let me grab my mic here. Frank and I, in Asian we do provide support to community organizations that are looking to create that greater sense of belonging for people with disabilities. We generally will do a presentation for a group that's semi-similar to this, but with some different elements, and can customize it for your group. And then we can also provide that technical assistance and ongoing support. So if you have an organization or a group of people in mind that you think could benefit from a training, this is all part of our grant program, so we can usually provide, you know, a basic training for free, and then, you know, kind of work out things based on after that. Again, we're looking for participants for our program, so if you know of anybody, you can get a hold of our entire team at leaders@mymdrc.org, and I would be happy to send out the inclusion scale. I apologize. I thought when the when they asked us to send it to them that they would have copies, but they are. Okay. Okay. Cool. So, any questions, comments? I think we're kind of at the end. Do we have 7 whole minutes? Oh, wait. This one's important.
Remember, you weren't the one that made you ashamed, but you are the one that can make you proud. Just practice until you get proud, and once you are proud, keep practicing so you won't forget to. You get proud by practicing. Laura Hershey.
And this is part of a larger poem called "You Get Proud by Practicing." Oh yeah.
So how do you navigate that when dealing with a younger population?
Have you ever tried to intermingle those groups? Is that like herding cats? Is that going to be like fighting cats?
Our clients are the kiddos. So we service the kiddos, so the parents have to be involved at a point, but it's only up until it's their pride that we're working on. So do you have recommendations on how to move that forward?
I think, you know, thinking about the kind of messaging, like in having their own pride in their child, they're passing along that idea of pride to their kids. And I know if I didn't have some of the messaging that I did when I was younger and had started on my disability journey earlier, so I think the parents can use this information. And I mean, I know it's hard to say like exactly this is what you do and say, but you know, I mean, they need to feel like they have someone in their corner, and it's just, I think you got to be careful though, because a lot of parents are also like grieving the loss of what they thought it was going to be, or, you know, but it's kind of like, we're here now, this is where we're at, and here's this different way of looking at disability that can help your child grow in such a healthy way and find other people in the community, and like really, like we saw in the video, like kind of almost build a little bit of a barrier between you and ableism, because you have this idea of like, yes, I know how the world works, I know how the world thinks about me, but I reject that. And there's a whole other community of people that also reject that. It's hard to say, you know, I know parents are challenging, yes.
I can speak as a parent. Sometimes, some days are hard, and trying to I wish I had a support group at one point in time, somebody else to talk to, because sometimes you do feel alone, you know, and they'll make a difference. You know, it just, parents need to talk to each other,
Mm-hmm.
you know, and I mean, I'll tell you right now, I am so proud of this young lady sitting next to me. It took a long time for me to accept it, but you want to know something? Being at groups like this, where I see case managers that truly care about their kids, it warms my heart. Just want to say that.
Thank you. Yeah.
And for those, yeah, and the conclusion of the session, the out code is 33.
Anybody have any other questions, comments? We have just like 3 more minutes. Really appreciate all the conversation. Yay, thank you. Thank you all. Enjoy the conference and your Memorial Day weekend if you get one.